Join me as I go through the latest Czech Republic population data looking at successful conceptions, essentially looking at the fertility across the population. This is concerning, and this is something that actually I predicted 2 years ago. It's because I did an extrapolation of the autoimmune SANS. I'm Dr. Philip McMillan, and I've been focused on autoimmunity in COVID 19 since early 2020. This is important, and the scientific and medical community needs to pay attention to try and understand the implications of what this means. Essentially, 2 years ago, I just did an extrapolation of the science. It's not complicated. Once you understand what's going on, it will help you to know and understand why it's occurring. I put together a presentation about infertility nightmare, the impact of COVID infection and vaccination. And this course in the link below is completely free. And it looks at all of the characteristics around what was happening in terms of the science on what was going on. And so this prediction now fits with what is happening in the Czech Republic. In the same way, I am extrapolating the science. And if you want to know what is going to happen next with regards to the heart, you need to join me as we look at the COVID heart storm, the scarring that's occurring in the heart across the population. Similar extrapolation of the science based on autopsy study. We have some serious problems ahead of us. The more you know, the better prepared you will be. But what is it that we're focused on with regards to what's happening in the Czech Republic? When you look at the data, and this is some of the data here from the Czech Republic, you can see Czech Statistical Office, population change in the first quarter of 2025. They're looking at migration. However, in this, they look at specifically what's happening with regards to births. So a total of 18.1 thousand children were born alive, of which 2.9 thousand or 14% fewer than the previous year. This is the fourth year in a row that birth rates have been declining. So this statistic is there, and this is across the world. People will believe almost anything. You tell them about microplastics, and they'll say, oh my goodness, that's the reason. They forget there is an elephant that is now so big that its trunk is sticking out the window. Nobody wants to acknowledge it. But the implications of this kind of process occurring across the population is humongous. Now, there are many factors that can have an impact on it because even in this section here, they pointed out that there is less people entering marriage, about 14% fewer than a year ago. So this would have an impact with regards to what was happening in the Czech Republic. So it's not necessarily always about the elephant in the room. However, this is the first time that a country has looked at population data. And so you're going to find that many people are going to try and discount it. And they will say there is no evidence of. And it's because they didn't look. They had not looked, and they reassured people without telling them that they hadn't looked. I don't know what to call that, but it's not good. So when we look at what happened in the Czech Republic, and we've got the paper here with regards to that, and this was just released, and you can imagine that they're trying to get their heads around it to try and figure out how to discount either the authors or something about the evidence, but they will not replicate this study because they are likely to find the same outcomes. So the only way to silence that criticism is to delete it, so to speak. But here is what they found. Rates of successful conceptions, they call it SC, according to COVID-19 vaccination status. Data from the Czech Republic. How long have we been asking for these kinds of studies? Straight and simple. Just look at who was vaccinated and who wasn't vaccinated to try and make sense of what is going on. For some reason, it seems as though that's just too hard to do. Thankfully, there are some people in the world who can follow basic science. Essentially, again, they noticed that there were impacts on the menstrual cycle in women, and many people ignored this factor and came up with all kinds of reasons why menstrual cycles would have been affected by women. I mean, it was one of the most unpredictable or unusual patterns in the pandemic where women's menstrual cycles were thrown off. In some studies, it was up to 44%, and they didn't study it and they ignored it. I mean, it's inconceivable. Essentially, what I'm doing here is the equivalent of pulling me back to 1970, seeing everybody smoking, and me saying, you're going to see a lot of COPD and cancer in the next decade or two. And people are saying, no, we disagree with that. There is no evidence. And I'm thinking, just follow the science. The science tells you what is going to happen next. If everybody started drinking heavily, lots of alcohol, I could predict quite easily that you're going to have a surge of liver disease down the line. It's not complicated. If you have an autoimmune issue in terms of the fact that the spike protein drives autoimmune responses, and you still have a virus which has spike protein on it circulating across the population, it doesn't take a genius to tell you you're going to get autoimmune responses across multiple organs, for which the reproductive are only one. But that's just an extrapolation of the science. Here you have, they looked at 1.3 million women aged 18 to 39 years in the Czech Republic. And then they just divided them up again according to their vaccination status. And what they found was SC, meaning successful conception, per 1,000 women were considerably lower for women who were vaccinated compared to those who were unvaccinated. This is essentially what we had been saying and got capped for misinformation because there was no evidence. How could there be evidence when we are only starting to study it and nobody wanted to study it except the Czech Republic? This is years down the line. And what essentially they found was this. In summary, this is at 2021 from the rollout. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 months, and it goes into 2022. And they did this up to 2023, the third month in 2023, March. They broke it down. Dark blue were vaccinated women, light blue were unvaccinated women, and the black line in the middle represents all women. Initially, you have these big areas of colored because the numbers were small, and so there were wide confidence intervals. But as time went on, these get smaller and smaller, and you start to see a pattern by about early 2022. And what becomes very obvious is that the dark blue here, vaccinated women, are at a lower number of successful conceptions per 1,000 women. And so you can see here, it's about, if you drew a line, it's about 4 or a little bit lower than 4. If you looked at the normal across all women, it's about 4.5 to 5. But when you look at the unvaccinated here, this is about 6. So when you are thinking about a percentage drop between 4 and 6, that is huge in terms of percentages. This is pretty serious. And this is what, as I said, the science extrapolated to. The fact that based on the autoimmune predictions, you are going to have damage to the reproductive systems. Now, I want you to look carefully at something here. Do you notice that there is a trend down on both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated? And you would think, why is it that successful conceptions could be decreasing in the unvaccinated cohort? Why wouldn't it stay stable? Well, here is my theory, and this is just my thought on it. What we're looking here at is successful conceptions. And I had predicted that in another 5 to 10 years, when you look at dating apps, a critical thing is going to be your name, your date of birth, your job, and your vaccination status. And this will work for men as well as women, because as I told you, the infertility prediction works on both sexes in different ways. For women, it is about what happens with the fertility or the release of the egg. In men, it's about what happens to the sperm. And what this is highlighting is that sadly, if women are not thinking about this, it is going to damage potentially the fertility across the board. Because one of the things that I showed in my in my presentation was that there was an impact on vaccination on sperm count. They found that it decreased and then had a rebound increase. Immediately, that's a red flag because that is indicating that the spike protein from the vaccination or the immune process damages the sperm initially, and there is some kind of recovery. But just because numbers have recovered does not mean function has. And so, therefore, what is likely to be occurring across the population is when you look at it, you are having a situation where unvaccinated women, if they are with vaccinated men who may have immune mediated problems, the successful conception will go down. This is why both are trending down. That's my thought. I don't know this for certain. It's just my extrapolation because, as I said, fertility is not just about women. It's also about how effective the sperm is in the context of creating fertilization. These are all huge steps. Now, can you believe it made me check back at something in the US because young women were one of the lowest cohorts for severe COVID 19. And they are in the reproductive age. You don't know the impact. You are seeing menstrual irregularities and you mandate it? Oh my goodness. Now, can you believe this is in the US? What colleges require COVID 19? Require. These mandates are still potentially in place. This is from February 17th, 2025. And President Trump issued an executive order restricting federal funding to any college. And when you look at this, the colleges up to 14th of February 2025 in California, in Georgia, New Hampshire, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania. Can you believe that one of the lowest risk cohorts, young people who are not getting severe COVID 19, for which you don't know the long term implications because the long term hasn't been reached, and they are still mandating it? What can you say? You know, you can accept the mistake early on in the pandemic because you didn't know in terms of risk. But to still have mandates up to February of 2025, when we're seeing this kind of impact on fertility across a population, this is horrendous. Just a reminder, this is what we're facing. Look at the difference between four per 1,000 if you're vaccinated, 6 per 1,000 if you're unvaccinated. That is absolutely huge. Well, what can we say? A lot of these things were considered to be conspiracies early on. For me, it was just an extrapolation of the science. It wasn't because I had any issue. I just knew the impact of the viral spike protein, and my rule was simple. If it can occur with the viral spike protein, it can occur with the vaccine spike protein because they are almost exactly alike except for tiny minor differences. Autoimmunity is still a huge issue and something that we're going to have to address in the long term. But across the world, I suspect that that global decline in birth rates and fertility is likely to be related to the elephant in the room. As a final point with this, is that you must know that, as I said from the paper, they highlighted very little data on the relationship between birth rates and COVID vaccine status have been reported. And to their knowledge, that relationship of COVID vaccination status and rates of successful conception has not been examined previously at a population level. They recognize the limitations. While the strength of our study is its nationwide unselected sample of fertile women, the observed association between decreased successful conception rates and COVID-19 vaccination is, of course, not proof of a causal relationship between vaccination and fecundability. Important point. However, the trend is so obvious that there is a responsibility to not think that you have to prove it is the problem. No, you have to do the research and ensure there isn't a problem before you do anything else. If anyone has seen this paper and they are involved with still doing mandates, in my view, for young women, that is where it falls clearly into the category of negligence. You cannot, should not, never do anything like that at this point without being absolutely certain about the impact and the safety. Lots more science to come. And as I reminded you, look in the description below. Join me as I go forward in the future to predict again. You're going to hear about this one in another 3 to 5 years. COVID heart storm, uncover the secret scars on the heart, simple extrapolation of the science. It's unlikely to be wrong, sadly. Have a great evening.